Hello, David Snopek here from Snopek Games, and this is part 4 in an ongoing course about using GitLab CI with a game project built in the Godot game engine. So what did we learn in previous parts? Well, in part 1, we set up GitLab CI to automatically export your game to all platforms, that being Windows, Linux, macOS, and HTML5 on every commit. In part 2, we set it up so that commits pushed to the master branch would automatically deploy your game builds to itch.io. And in part 3, we set it up to automatically deploy your game to Steam. With one exception, we only did Windows and Linux because Steam requires that macOS builds be notarized by Apple. And we're covering that Apple notarization process in this part, which is useful not just for Steam, but at the end we are going to do a little bit about how to deploy this new notarized macOS build to Steam. So why do Apple notarization? Well, Steam requires it, that's one, but also to prevent this scary message when users try to open your app. So I downloaded one of my games, Fish Game from itch.io, tried to open it and got this message with the scary warning exclamation point there, which just looks unprofessional, might put users off from actually playing your game. So what actually is Apple notarization? Well, it's first signing your game, which is a pretty normal thing to do. This is basically taking a private key and certificate and using that to add a signature to your executable that says this exact unmodified executable came from the person or organization identified in the certificate. This is something that is done on many platforms, not just for Apple and macOS. And then you send your signed app to Apple for notarization. This is a very Apple-specific thing. I don't know of any other platform that does it quite like this. Then some minutes later, Apple will send you back a ticket, and then you staple the ticket to your game. They actually use the term staple. My guess is that Apple is collecting hashes of known good apps, and then when you open an app, it checks the app against that list of hashes, and if it matches, it doesn't show you that message. And also, it is tying this exact executable to a developer account with Apple, which means if you do end up including a virus or malware or anything nasty in your app, they know where to find you. So Apple notarization must be done on a Mac, but you can set up GitLab CI runner to run on any macOS machine that you have access to that is connected to the internet. If you don't physically have a Mac, I don't, you can use a service like Mac and Cloud. There's a whole bunch of other services. I've heard of Mac Stadium. I think Amazon AWS also has a service that will let you run a Mac Mini in the cloud somewhere, and you're basically just renting time on someone else's Mac that's hosted somewhere else. On Mac and Cloud, I use their pay-as-you-go plan, which charges just $1 an hour. And you just have to boot up your Mac and have it connected to the internet whenever you are running a build that will do Apple notarization. And that doesn't need to be all builds. Personally, I have it set up only to do Apple notarization when I'm deploying to itch or Steam. Otherwise, I can just leave that Mac and Cloud turned off and end up paying, a couple of bucks per week if I'm doing a lot of builds. There are a couple of prerequisites. You need to have a developer account with Apple. You can create that by going to developer.apple.com, and there is a $100 a year fee to be an Apple developer. And you need, of course, a macOS machine with Xcode installed. If you're using Mac and Cloud, your machine will come with Xcode installed, which is useful. So let's get down to it. All right, this is my Mac and Cloud. It's running macOS Catalina. On Mac and Cloud, you basically can go to a configuration page and pick whichever version of macOS you would like. I chose Catalina because it's new-ish and lots of people have it. I'm sure as time goes on and more people have the newer versions of macOS, I will go back into that configuration and update it to a new version. In any case, first we are going to create a public and private key pair and a developer certificate to sign our game with. So to do that, we are going to open up Keychain Access, which you can get to by going to Applications, then the Utilities folder, and there it is, Keychain Access. And you're going to click Keychain Access, Certificate Assistant, and request a certificate from a certificate authority. Then in here, for the email, put in your email address that is associated with your Apple developer account, And in common name, put whatever name you would like to use to identify this public and private key pair on your machine. So to not confuse myself, I'm going to call it test notarization key. You should probably name it something like the name of your dev studio dev key or something. And change request is to saved to disk and press continue. Then save this certificate somewhere that you will be able to find it again. I'm going to save it under Documents, and I'm going to name it Certificate Signing Request 4, as to not confuse myself, but you can name it whatever you want. All right, and then we can close Certificate Assistant. Now we need to go to developer.apple.com and log into your developer account. You'll end up on this account dashboard page, and then you want to click on Certificates, IDs, and Profiles. You can see I have two certificates here. One is the certificate that I really actually use, and the other is one that I created when running through this tutorial earlier in a dry run. But you will probably have no certificates here. So you'll go click on the plus icon by certificates, and then you want to pick that you are making a developer ID application certificate. Then go click continue, and then choose file. And you want to pick the certificate signing request that you created in the previous step. So I'm going to click open, and then here you would click continue, which would create your certificate. I am not going to press continue. I do not want to keep accumulating certificates on my developer account that I'm not actually using. But after you click continue, you'll be taken to a page that looks just like this, and you will click the download button up here to download your certificate. After it's downloaded, you will open it, which will open it back up in Keychain Access. So now if we're looking around in Keychain Access, we can see the certificate here, and you need to take note of the name of the certificate, this full string, copy, paste, and save that somewhere. We're going to need it later. And then also your public and private key. So you should be all set. The last thing that you want to do is export and back up all of this stuff. So right-click on your private key, export, pick a place to save it, press save, and then it will ask for a password to essentially encrypt this key on disk, and then when later you want to import it back into Keychain Access, you will need to enter the same password again in order to decrypt it and import it. Technically, the only thing that you absolutely must back up is your private key. The public key can be derived from the private key with the right utility, and the certificate can always be downloaded again from developer.apple.com. However, I highly recommend just backing up everything just in case. You don't want to lose it, and then you need to keep it very securely, because if anyone else is able to get a hold of your private key, then they will be able to sign apps as you and impersonate you and possibly distribute malware and have it look like it's coming from you. So don't do that. Back everything up and keep it very securely. All right, let's close Keychain Access. The next thing that we need to do is install the GitLab CI runner. So to do that, we are going to open up the cheat sheet for this course. You can find a link to it in the description below, and go to the Installing GitLab CI Runner on macOS section. So there's a link here to the official docs, which totally work, but the way that they have them written, they have the steps written, it requires an admin account on the machine, and you don't need an admin account on the machine, but if you don't have one, you have to follow slightly different steps. On Mac and Cloud, you do not have an admin account on the machine, so we are going to be following the steps here. So open up a terminal, and we are going to do cd documents, and we are going to, I already have a GitLab CI runner because like I said, I ran through this earlier, so I'll just delete that. You don't need to do that. And then we need to run this command to download the GitLab CI runner. So let's copy that. We'll paste in here. All right, now we need to run the next command, which is this chmod +x GitLab runner. And then we are going to register our runner with gitlab.com. Because GitLab is open source and isn't run necessarily only on gitlab.com, you could have your own instance of it. You need to put in the URL to the GitLab instance. We are using gitlab.com, so we're just going to enter https://gitlab.com. Then it needs a registration token. You get that by going to your project on gitlab.com. Here's the git test 1 project we've been using throughout this course. And we're going to go to settings, CI/CD, and go to runners, click expand. And here it gives a registration token. We're going to copy that token, go over to the terminal again, paste it, enter a description for the runner. So this is a name in gitlab.com that will identify this runner in particular. We're going to call it maybe Mac in Cloud tutorial, so I can delete it later. And then we need to enter some tags for the runner. You need to enter OSX, shell. And we're going to use these tags later in our GitLab CI configuration to make sure that the macOS signing job runs on this runner as opposed to some other runner. Next, it asks us to pick an executor. We are going to enter shell. Previously, we've always been using the Docker executor, which will run each job in a Docker image that you specify. But here, we want it to run in the shell executor because we want it to run on this actual host machine so that it has access to Xcode and all of the keys that we just created in keychain access. So type shell, hit enter, and now our GitLab runner is registered. We have a couple more commands to run. We will run GitLab runner install and GitLab runner start. So now the GitLab CI runner is running on this machine, and every time you log in, it will also start up again, running as your local user. So if we go look here, I believe if we refresh this runners page for our project, we should see our Mac and Cloud tutorial runner being registered to be used by just this specific project. We are back on my Windows VM where we've done most of this course. And now we are going to edit the .gitlab-ci.yml file to add a job for actually signing and notarizing our game. So let's go to the cheat sheet, go down to the Apple code signing and notarization section. We'll copy and paste this bit of YAML from here, and then we will talk through it. So I will edit the .gitlab-ci.yml file with Notepad++, and I'm going to put this new job right below the normal macOS job. You can see that macOS X signed is the new job. It's in a new stage called sign. So we actually need to make sure that that stage exists up here, putting it between export and deploy. You can see that we have these tags set. So this will only run on a GitLab CI runner that is tagged with OSX and shell. Since we only have one such runner on our project, we know exactly where it's going to run. It's going to run in Mac and Cloud. We set a dependency on Mac OS X. This means that we will get the artifacts that are built in the normal Mac OS X job. So that's the exported build. And we also set needs Mac OS X, which is a little bit different and optional. Basically, what this allows is for the Mac OS X signed job to start running as soon as the Mac OS X job is finished. Normally, GitLab CI will run all of these stages in series, so it'll make sure that all of the export jobs are done before moving on to all of the signed jobs, before moving on to all of the deploy jobs. And this way, like, if the Windows and Linux jobs are like taking a really long time to finish, but the Mac OS X one is done, it can just skip right away to the signing stage. So it just makes the overall pipeline run a little faster, potentially. And then we are down to the script, which does all of the real work. So we're creating a new directory under the build directory, macOS X signed. We're doing some admittedly overcomplex code to figure out what the app name is. This probably could be simplified, but it's fine. You know, it figures out what the app path and the app name is. It copies the app itself from the old artifact, the macOS X artifact, into the new macOS X signed directory, which of course we're going to make into its own artifact at the end of this job. And then it runs this macOS X-notarize.sh script, which does all of the real work. And you know, it runs only on the master branch because we're only doing this when we are deploying a build to itch.io or Steam, which happens when we commit to the master branch. So next, let's take a look at this script. You can get it by going to the cheat sheet and going to this link. We will copy and paste all of these contents here. We'll talk through them in a moment. And we're going to place them in, we have to make a new folder here called scripts. We're going to create a new text file, which is notarize. Oh, I'm so bad at spelling notarize. macOS X.sh. Let me just verify that that is, oops, yes, I want to change it. Just verify that I did that right. Scripts macOS X-notarize. Okay. And let's edit this with Notepad++. Paste in the contents. All right, so this is quite complicated. And actually, I should say I will give some credit to, where is the cheat sheet here? To John Gervin, who posted this gist to GitHub, upon which my script is based. I made a number of additions and modifications, but thanks to John Gervin, who posted this, I got quite a head start on it. So let's look at the script. So there are a bunch of variables that we're going to need to set in gitlab.com that the script depends on. If they can't be found, you know, it dies, it exits with an error. It grabs the argument that we passed to it, which was, you know, the app name, derives, you know, the name, the work dir. I guess I don't need to go through in this much detail, but we also have this entitlements argument that can be passed. Entitlements are like permissions that your macOS app needs in order to run. It's possible that it doesn't need any entitlements, and that's fine, but if there's some OS feature that requires permission, you need to make an entitlements file, and then you'll have to pass it as the second argument here so that it will be added to your app during signing. You see during when it's running the code sign CLI tool, it passes in these entitlements that you give it. Anyway, getting down to the actual signing, there's this code sign tool that is present on our macOS machine. It uses this macOS identity variable. This is the name of the certificate that you should have noted when we were working in keychain access, and you know, upon the rest of the necessary arguments. Then we zip up the app and run this xc run command line tool, xc for Xcode. This is a command line way to run different functions of Xcode, and this is what is actually sending our zip file containing our app to Apple and passing in all of these variables that we have set and outputting an XML file, which then is read using this plistbuddy tool, which I don't know anything about. This is a macOS thing. I totally got this from John Gervin's script to extract the request UUID, and then it kind of loops, waiting 30 seconds for each loop, calling back to Apple and saying, hey, is the notarization done yet? And when it finally finishes, it is able to get this ticket and then use xc run stapler to staple that ticket to the app. So yeah, I guess we didn't go through everything in here. It's not super important. There's just that you get the general picture of what it is doing. Let's switch over to our project on gitlab.com. We're going to go down to Settings, CI/CD, and set all of the necessary environment variables. So we'll open up variables here. We only have the one variable from when we set up deployment to itch.io for this project. And we need to add the Mac OS X signature identity variable. And this, like I said, is the name of your certificate in keychain access. So this is what it is for me. And we need to add the Mac OS X bundle ID. This is kind of like a namespace string. You can just kind of make this up. I always do, com.snowpackgames. something that represents the name of the game. You also have to specify a similar bundle string in the export settings. When you're exporting to macOS, I recommend having these two values be the same. Although I don't know if it really matters that much. I've just always done it like that, and it has worked. So we will add that variable. You need to add a Mac OS X Apple ID variable, and this is the email address associated with your Apple developer account. And finally, we have to add a Mac OS X Apple password variable. And confusingly, this isn't actually the password for your developer account. It's instead this app-specific password that you have to go and create. And you do that by going to, appleid.apple.com. So this is not developer.apple.com, which we were on before. This is appleid.apple.com. And you need to sign in here. Get my password out of LastPass. Sign in. Oh, and two-factor authentication. All right. And we're in. So if you scroll down to the security section, you'll see this app-specific passwords. Click Generate Password, and then enter some kind of label so that you know what this password is for in case later you need to go manage your passwords and maybe revoke one. So we will call this like Apple notarization, and I'm going to call it test so that I know which one to delete when I'm done with this tutorial. And you need to put in your password again. And it gives you this app-specific password, which we are going to copy and paste in here. Mac OS X Apple password. All right, that all looks right. So this should be all of the environment variables necessary to notarize a build. And so let's try it. Let's see what happens. I'm going to right-click on the folder with our project, do git bash here, do git status. Oh, we're actually going to have to make like a tiny change to our gitlab-ci.yml. Because I do not want to push this to the master branch, just because I want to keep reusing this project for future tutorials. So I'm going to switch the signing to only take place on this Mac OS X, what did I call it? What did I call this branch? Mac OS X signing. Okay. So in your project, you probably want to keep that as master, but for the purposes of demonstration during this tutorial, we're just going to change that. So let's add everything, do git status, do git diff -- stage to take a look at what the changes are. This all looks good. And let's commit it. Say notarize build with Apple. Close this, and we'll push it. switch back to our project on GitLab, go to CI/CD pipelines. We'll go to this pipeline. It's doing all of the builds, Linux, macOS, web, Windows, and once the macOS X one is finished, it will go over to this signing build. All right, the macOS X build has finished. Let's go watch the macOS X sign build. You can see it downloading the artifacts from the macOS X build. What did I screw up here? It looks like I named the script wrong. Of course, I'm going to make a mistake in a live demo. Let's just quick rename this. It was macOS X notarize, not notarize macOS X. And let's push it and try again. And it looks like I forgot one more thing. Because all of these variables are marked as protected, they will only be available to GitLab CI jobs that run on protected branches. And this new branch that I made up just for this purpose is not protected. So let me quickly go to settings, I think repository, protected branches. And we will select the macOS X signing branch and set that maintainers are allowed to merge and push protect. Let me just take a look at this really quick. All right, it's protected. So you probably won't have to do that if you're doing this with the master branch, but I did because I used this other branch. All right, I finally got the job to succeed. It turned out that I made another mistake, a copy and paste mistake when I was putting the code into .gitlab-ci.yml, which is now fixed. So let's look through what happened in this build. So starting at the top, you can see that it's running on the GitLab runner on Mac and Cloud tutorial, which we had added to the project earlier. You can see this is the host name of my Mac and Cloud. And over here we see runtime platform AMD64 OS Darwin, which is Mac OS, so we can tell that this is running on our Mac OS machine on Mac and Cloud. We see that it is grabbing the artifacts from the Mac OS X build, and then it is doing our work, running our script, which first outputs signing. And at this stage, actually, you should keep an eye on your Mac machine, because the first time that you run this, it may give a pop-up from Keychain Access asking you to enter your Mac OS password, the password you use to log into the system, and to allow that keychain to be used. And there's an always allow button that you can hit so that on subsequent builds you don't have to do anything on your Mac. It will just go through automatically. So anyway, it's signing, outputs some information, then it's uploading it for notarization. You can see all of the files that it's putting in the zip file that it's sending to be notarized. We get a request UUID, and then it waits for notarization to complete. You can see it printing out the time every 30 seconds as it's checking in on the notarization process. Once it comes back, it does stapling ticket to app, and then puts that into an artifact and uploads it. So now if we go here, job artifacts, and press download, we will get the now signed and notarized macOS app. And if you wanted to integrate this into your itch.io deployment, you would come down to the itch job that we set up back in part 2. We would change the dependencies to not be macOS X, but macOS X. Is it signed or sign? Let's go double check that really quick. Signed, macOS X signed. And then down here with our butler commands, we need to change that we are pushing macOS signed, the contents of the macOS signed directory, to the same place. And that should be enough. With these changes, it should now push the signed and notarized macOS X build instead of the unsigned one. One more thing I wanted to add before we move on is that I had already booted up my Mac and Cloud before starting here. But if I hadn't done that, if the Mac and Cloud was down, what would have happened on GitLab CI is that this job would have been stalled. I forget exactly the term that GitLab CI uses, whether it's stalled or pending or something, waiting for an available runner. And that's because it wouldn't be able to find a runner with the tags that we had given it, the OSX and shell tags. And you have some period of time to then go boot up your Mac machine, which will then grab the job as soon as the GitLab CI runner starts on that machine, and do it. If you wait too long, eventually the pipeline will time out, but it's like a really long time. Like, I think I've left it waiting like 20 minutes before. I don't know exactly how long it has to be before it'll give up, but you do have this window of time where it will just stall here. You can go start up your Mac. Any jobs that depend on the Mac OS X signed job will just also stay pending, waiting for that job to complete. Now, as promised, I'm going to talk a little bit at the end here about the changes you'd need to make to deploy a signed and notarized Mac OS X build to Steam. So first, you need to open up your project in Godot, go to Project, Export. We need to add a new export preset for the Mac OS X Steam build, just like we did for all of the other platforms. We'll name it Mac OS X parentheses Steam, and here you would set the custom export templates and the export path and all of that, just like we did in the last part. Save this. And then you need to go to the cheat sheet and find a section called Apple Notarization with Steam, and copy the additions for gitlab-ci.yml. We will edit our YAML file here, and we are going to add the Mac OS X stuff after the other builds, but before the Steam build. All right, and this stuff looks basically the same as for Windows and Linux. We're grabbing the Godot Steam export templates, updating the export preset to use those, exporting, and yeah, doing the same stuff with grabbing the Steam redistributables and all of that. And then over in Mac OS X Steam signed, we are again doing this very similar to the Mac OS X signed job. But this one is directly targeting the Mac OS X Steam's artifacts and does basically the exact same thing with one small change. It is passing in as a second argument to our Mac OS X entitlements.sh script this entitlements file. And this is because there are some special permissions that Steam apps need to have in order to be able to use the Steam API. So then if we go back to the cheat sheet, we're going to copy and paste this entitlements file, which needs to go into a file in script steam macOS X-entitlements.plist. All right, I will try not to screw this up, although we're not actually going to really run this, so it is a little bit lower pressure here. But we go into scripts, steam, and we're going to make a new text document, Mac OS X entitlements.plist. Edit that in Notepad++, copy paste, which is asking for these two special permissions that the Steam API needs. Also, back in this directory, you also need to make a new depot for the Mac OS X build. We'll imagine this is using depot ID 1003, which of course you will need to log into Steamworks and configure just like we did in the last part. Oops, that was 1002. Let's get to 1003 here. And this requires very minor changes, the right depot ID, and we need to look for the files in Mac OS X Steam signed. And of course, in the app VDF file, we also need to include this new depot VDF. And then in our .gitlab-ci.yml file, all we need to do down here to the Steam job is to add Mac OS X Steam signed to pull in the artifacts from that build. And I think that is everything we need to do to get Steam working as well. That's it. That's all I've got for today. Please let me know if you have any questions, if there's anything unclear, anything I missed, or anything that you'd like to see in a future part of this course. So thanks a lot. See you later. Bye-bye.